My golden child sister got $75,000 from my grandparents to buy a house. But when I found out it was my college money, I sued them all, and they never saw coming what I did next. I'm 17 years old. I'm about to start college, and I need to tell this story because I still can't believe that my own parents, the people who are supposed to take care of me, literally stole my future and handed it to my sister on a silver platter. And when I say stole, I'm not being dramatic. I mean, they literally took the money my grandparents left specifically for me in their will and used it to buy my older sister a house. But anyway, I guess I should start from the beginning. When all of this was just a normal family with annoying but manageable favoritism, before it turned into this legal nightmare that basically made me grow up like 10 years in a few months. My paternal grandparents died when I was like 12 years old. First my grandmother from cancer and then my grandfather like 6 months later. I think from sadness more than anything because they were super in love. You know, one of those couples who've been together like 50 years and can't live without each other. I was very close to them, more than my sister Sophia, who by then was already like 20 years old and was in college studying to be a kindergarten teacher. And honestly, she never had much time for grandparents because she was always busy with her stuff. But I did. I went to their house every weekend. I'd sleep over. My grandmother taught me how to make cookies, and my grandfather told me stories about when he was young. It was like my safe place, you know? When they died, they left me a college fund in their will. Specifically for me. Like $80,000 they'd been saving their whole lives because they never got to go to college and wanted me to have that opportunity. My parents told me when I was 12, they sat me down and explained that grandparents had left me this incredible gift and that I had to use it wisely for my education. I cried because it made me feel so loved and at the same time so sad that they weren't here anymore to see what I was going to accomplish with that money. The thing is, there was always favoritism in my house. Like really obvious. But I thought it was normal because Sophia is 8 years older than me and was always like the perfect child. You know, she got good grades, never got in trouble, was super sociable, and everyone adored her. My parents literally put her on a pedestal. And it's not that I was a bad kid or anything, it's just that I was never enough compared to her. If Sophia got an A, it was celebration with a special dinner. If I got an A, it was like, oh, that's nice, honey, and that was it. If Sophia needed something, my parents moved heaven and earth to give it to her. If I needed something, it was wait, let's see if we have the budget. And well, it hurt, honestly. But I dealt with it because I thought that when it was my turn to go to college, things would be different. All that I'd have my own path and my own money from grandparents. And finally, I could do something just mine, without being in my perfect sister's shadow. Sophia graduated from college like 3 years ago and got a job as a kindergarten teacher at an elementary school near where my parents and I lived. And there she met her boyfriend James, who's a zookeeper, like a super chill guy who works with lions and tigers and stuff like that. They started dating and my parents loved him. It was always James this and James that. And how Sophia had found the perfect man and how they were going to have such a nice life together. I was like 15 at that time, and honestly, I didn't care much because I was busy with school and my own friends. But I did notice that every time there was a family gathering or dinner, everything revolved around Sophia and James and their plans and their future. Nobody asked me how school was going or what I wanted to study in college. It was always about those two. Fast forward to like 8 months ago, I was in my junior year of high school, super stressed with exams and college applications and all that stuff. And one night I came home and my parents were in the living room with Sophia and James, all super excited about something. I walked in and asked them what was going on, and Sophia showed me pictures on her phone of a house, like a nice 2-story house with a yard and everything, and told me they'd bought it, that they were going to move in together. And I was like, oh cool, congratulations. Because, well, what else was I going to say, right? But then my mom said something that made me stop in my tracks. She said they were so proud to be able to help Sophia take this important step in her life. And my dad added that they'd been able to give her the full down payment so she wouldn't have to worry so much about the monthly payments. And I thought, well, they've always spent more on Sophia. I guess they saved up or something. But like 2 weeks later, I was looking for some documents for my college application in my dad's study. I needed copies of, I don't know what, tax forms or something, and I found a folder with papers from my grandparents' trust. And honestly, I wasn't going to read it. I mean, I wasn't snooping or anything, but I saw my name on one of the papers and got curious. So I started reading, and there it was. A transfer of $75,000 from the trust to my parents' name dated like 3 months ago, right when Sophia and James bought the house. I sat there on the study floor trying to process what I was seeing, because it didn't make sense. That money was mine. My grandparents left it for my education, not for my parents to give it to Sophia to buy a house with her boyfriend. My hands were shaking when I went downstairs with the papers. My parents were watching TV in the living room, and I just put the documents in front of them and asked what the hell this was. And you know what they did? They looked at each other with that "oh shit, we got caught" face. And my dad tried to explain that Sophia needed help, that buying a house is very difficult for young people nowadays, that they as parents had to help all their children equally. And I was like, equally? Seriously? That money was specifically for me? For my college? Grandparents put it in a will with my name on it. It's not their money to distribute as they please. My mom then said not to worry, that they were going to help me with college in other ways, that I could apply for scholarships and student loans, and that they'd contribute what they could. And I exploded. I yelled at them that it wasn't the same, that my grandparents had worked their whole lives to leave me that money specifically so I wouldn't have to go into debt, and that they'd basically stolen their favorite daughter's future from me. What happened next still gives me goosebumps, because instead of apologizing or trying to fix it or showing even a little bit of remorse, my parents laughed. They literally laughed at me. My dad said something like, "Oh, you're going to sue your own parents with what money exactly?" And my mom added that I was being a dramatic teenager, and that when I grew up, I'd understand that sometimes their families have to make sacrifices for everyone's good. I told them I was going to find a way to sue them, that this was illegal and they knew it. And my dad just looked at me and said, "Go ahead then. Try it. Let's see what lawyer is going to take you seriously being a minor and broke." And in that moment, something broke inside me. You know, like when you realize that the people who raised you don't actually see you as a person with your own rights, but as someone they can manipulate and control because you're their daughter. That night, I packed everything I could into 2 suitcases and a backpack, called my best friend and explained the situation, and her parents told me I could stay with them as long as I needed. I left a note on the kitchen table that said something like, "I'm leaving. Find someone else to steal a future from," and I left. My parents didn't even call me that night, not the next day either. Like they didn't even care that their 17-year-old daughter had left the house. My friend's mom hugged me when I arrived and told me everything was going to be okay, that we'd find a way to fix this, and I cried for the first time since I'd found those papers, because finally, someone was validating me. Someone was telling me I wasn't crazy for being angry. The next day I logged into Facebook, which I almost never do because basically only adults use it, right? And posted something on my wall explaining the whole situation, not with all the details but enough for extended family to know what had happened. I tagged all my uncles and aunts, my older cousins, any family member who might have some idea of how to help me. Most of the comments were like, "Oh, Mija, what a difficult situation," or "families should resolve these problems privately." Basically people who didn't want to get involved. But then my Uncle David, my dad's younger brother, who's a high-ranking officer in the military and who I'd practically not seen in years because he had a fight with my parents when I was little about something they never explained to me, sent me a private message that said, "Call me right now," and gave me his number. I talked to him that afternoon and told him everything, absolutely everything, from the favoritism to discovering the theft to my parents laughing at me when I threatened to sue. My Uncle David was silent for a moment after I finished talking, and then said in that super serious military voice he uses, "Emma, your parents committed a federal crime. They misappropriated trust funds, and I'm going to handle this personally." He told me he knew the lawyer who had executed my grandparents' will, a guy named Michael who was also a family friend, and that they were going to do whatever was necessary to make my parents return every penny. I asked him if he was sure, if we could really win this, and he told me there was no doubt, that the law was completely on my side, and that my parents had been so stupid they hadn't even tried to hide well what they'd done. Not even a week passed when my uncle called my parents directly, and I knew it happened because my mom called me for the first time since I'd left, yelling at me, how dare I involve Uncle David in private family matters, that what I was doing was going to destroy the family. And I was like, "You already destroyed this family when you stole from me, so don't come at me with that now." My uncle had made it very clear to them that either they returned the full amount to the trust immediately, or Michael was going to file a formal lawsuit for misappropriation of trust funds, and that with his position in the military and his connections, he was going to make sure the case didn't go unnoticed. Basically, he gave them a week to decide. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my friend's house. It was super awkward because they knocked on the door and my friend's parents asked me if I wanted to see them, and I said yes, because I knew they were coming to beg. And I was right. They sat down with me in the living room, with my friend's parents there, as witnesses, which I really appreciated, and started with this whole spiel about how they'd made a mistake, that they hadn't realized how important this was to me, that they were willing to pay my college tuition when the time came and please make my uncle withdraw the lawsuit threat. My dad even cried, something I'd never in my life seen him do. And my mom took my hands and said they loved me and didn't want to lose me. And a part of me, that part that still wants to believe your parents love you unconditionally, like wanted to give in. But then I remembered how they'd laughed at me, as how they'd treated me like I had no right to be angry about them stealing my future. I told them no, that I wanted my full money back in the trust where it should be, not some alternative arrangement where they paid my tuition when it was convenient for them. I explained that money represented my grandparents' love for me, that it was the last thing I had left of them, and that I wasn't going to let them turn it into a tool of control over my life. My dad got furious and said I was being ridiculous, that Sophia had already used that money as a down payment and it was impossible to recover it. And I told him that was his problem, not mine, that they had decided to steal from me so they had to find a way to return it. They left angry. My mom said something about how someday I was going to regret destroying my family like this, and the door closed behind them. My Uncle David acted fast after that, contacted Michael the lawyer, and between the two of them they put together a solid case. My uncle also helped me find a small apartment near where school was and told me he'd cover the rent until all this was resolved and I could access my money. His wife, my Aunt Lisa, took me shopping to get basic furniture and kitchen stuff, and honestly, they were more parents to me in those weeks than my own parents had been in years. I moved into the apartment like a month after I'd left home, and it was weird because I was 17 years old living alone, well, technically with my uncle paying for things but alone day to day, but it was also liberating, you know? Like, I could finally breathe without constantly comparing myself to Sophia, or feeling like nothing I did was good enough. When the lawsuit papers were finally served, it was a whole drama. My parents had to hire a lawyer and everything, and the lawyer basically told them they had no case, that they'd violated the terms of the trust clearly and with documentation. There were like 3 virtual mediation sessions where I was sitting in my apartment with my uncle and Michael on my side of the screen, and my parents with their lawyer on the other side. And it was so surreal to see my own parents trying to legally justify why they stole my money. Their main argument was that as my legal guardians, they had the right to make decisions about the trust on my behalf. But Michael destroyed that argument by showing that the trust specifically stipulated the money could only be used for my educational expenses, not for general family expenses. In the second mediation session, my parents changed tactics and offered the same deal again, that they would pay for my college directly without touching the money they'd given Sophia. And the mediator looked at me, expecting me to consider the offer, but I said no, and that I wanted the full money back, because it was mine, and because I needed to know I had financial security, independent of what my parents decided to do or not do in the future. My mom started crying on the screen saying I was asking for the impossible, that Sophia would have to sell her house, that it wasn't fair to her. And I literally said that Sophia could sell the house or my parents could take out a loan or whatever, but that I wasn't going to give in because the money was legally mine and everyone on that call knew it. Finally, like 2 weeks before the case was going to go to formal court, my parents gave up. Their lawyer had explained that if we went to court, not only were they going to lose, but they'd probably have to pay legal costs for both parties, plus possible sanctions for misappropriation of funds, and that the best thing was to reach an agreement. They agreed to return the full $75,000 to the trust, plus the interest it would have generated if it had remained invested all that time, which ended up being like another $4,000. I have no idea how they did it, if they took out a loan against their house or what, but the money was transferred back to my trust, and Michael confirmed everything was in order. The weird thing was that a week after everything was resolved, Sophia sent me a text message, the first one since all this had started. She told me she needed to talk to me, that there were things she didn't know and we wanted to explain. Part of me didn't want to hear her, but another part was curious, so I told her we could meet at a public cafe. When she arrived, she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days, and before I could say anything, she started apologizing. She told me she didn't know, that she literally didn't know the money for the down payment came from my trust, that my parents had told her they'd saved up and wanted to help her buy her first house. When the lawsuit started and she found out the truth, she confronted our parents and they told her I was exaggerating, that the money was family money and there was enough for both of us. Sophia looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she felt horrible, that she never would have accepted that money if she'd known where it came from. I don't know if I completely believed her because Sophia has always been the favorite and has always received more without questioning it, but I also saw something genuine in her regret. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I needed time, that what had happened had changed my perspective of my whole family, and I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. She understood and told me that when I was ready, if I was ever ready, she'd be there. We said goodbye awkwardly, and we haven't talked much since then, just occasional messages for birthdays and stuff like that. The incredible part of this whole nightmare is that I ended up being accepted to my first choice college with an academic scholarship that covers 60% of tuition. So, my grandparents' money is going to be more than enough to cover the rest, plus housing and food and books and everything I need. I applied with an essay about this whole experience, about learning to stand up for myself and understanding that true family love doesn't include theft and manipulation, and apparently it resonated with the admissions committee. I start in 2 weeks, and honestly, I'm terrified, but also super excited to finally have the opportunity my grandparents wanted me to have. My uncle David and Aunt Lisa helped me move into the dorms last week. We filled up their truck with all my stuff and drove the 3 hours to campus. And when we were finishing unpacking, my uncle hugged me and told me my grandparents would be proud of me, not just for going to college, but for standing firm and fighting for what was mine. And I cried because I miss my grandparents so much and I wish they were here to see this, but also because I have this new kind of family now, with my uncle and aunt who showed me that real family supports you when you need it most, doesn't steal your future. My parents sent me a message the day I moved to college. They said something about hoping I was happy now that I'd gotten what I wanted, with like a bitter tone but trying to sound cordial. I didn't respond to them. Maybe someday we'll have some kind of relationship again. I don't know. But for now, I'm focused on starting my college life with the money my grandparents left me specifically for this, living in my own space that I paid for with what was left from the trust after paying for the first year. I have enough for all 4 years if I manage the money well, and even a little extra for emergencies or to start my life after I graduate. It's exactly what my grandparents wanted for me, and I finally have it back where it should be.